Good evening, everybody. Sorry for the delay. Um, One of the fundamental things that we'll talk about when we talk about Vedanta and we talk about the science and how the two work together is first we'll go over the basics of Vedanta and then of course we go over how modern science and Vedanta they kind of match, where a lot of the concepts, the core concepts of Vedanta today are validated, strongly validated by science. And I don't mean theoretical validation, I mean experimental validation. That is what we are going to talk about, right? So I'll start with a quotation from Swami Vivekananda. It is very pertinent to any study of Vedanta. So I'll specifically talk about the Advaita Vedanta. And I'll come into what Advaita stands for in this context, or in any context for that matter. Do not believe a thing because you have read about in a book. Do not believe a thing because another man, any man, has said it was true. Do not believe in words because they are hallowed in by tradition. Find out the truth for yourself. Reason it out. That is realization. So the key thing, when I first knew about Vedanta, I was in class 11. I started reading the books of Swami Vivekananda. The concepts, the statements were so bold and so life-turning that it kind of messed up with my head. In Bengali we say, indigestion or bodhajam. And I sort of lost all interest in studies. And why would I do any studies? It is totally meaningless in this context. And then, after many years now, I can see where these two things match together. Why people can live a normal life and yet understands or go in the path of understanding of what Vedanta is. But it was a very interesting experience. So the thing is, today what we are going to talk about is we are not going to talk about a lot of random keywords and concepts. We'll talk about in simple terms that we all can understand, we can associate with. And if I'm saying something that you want clarifications or you have any additional questions, obviously, please ask. So, when we say Vedant, what we mean is Ant of Ved, right? Vedant is a portion of Ved, so Ant here means couple of things. It is the last portion of the Ved which was taught to the people in the jungles, Aranyak portion of the Ved. It is also the summary, the culmination of Ved, the culmination of the knowledge that is contained in the Ved, right? So Ved is, if you look at it, it's essentially two parts. There are many ways of slicing and dicing it. One is for normal people, get into the path of spirituality. So, there are some customs, there are some processes you follow. And if you kind of look through this whole process, you will realize there is one good reason why that segment is there. To help us focus our mind. In any profession you are there, and I'm sure, people here are in different professions, you have seen success comes with the ability to focus the mind. And we'll see, throughout my life I have been taught, monosanjog karo, focus your mind, that's what I have been told. And I have come to realize, it isn't, what we really mean by focusing is our mind is to actually eliminate thoughts from our mind. So mind is not what helps us, but mind is what actually prevents us from accomplishing anything. It is kind of the disturbing kid in the neighborhood, It's a Dennis the Menace in your neighborhood. And we'll kind of get more into the thing. So we'll start with, let's start with the core concepts, very core concepts. So there is a saying that there are 4 Mahavakyas, great sayings of Ved. From all the 4 Ved, one small phrase has been picked up, saying that this is, this kind of summarizes what is in Ved. So the Mahavakyas, and I'm not going to go into full details of them, and this is probably the only time that I'll go into some Sanskrit. It's just very small here. And Pragyanam Brahma. That's what they say. I am Atma Brahma. See, all the 4 Mahavakyas, they actually say the same thing. Pragya. What's Pragya? Pragya has been differently defined as consciousness, the bearer of intelligence. So that which you are, that is Brahma. I am Atma Brahma. I am Brahma. So what is Brahma? Brahma is just a word for us, right? Brahma is just a word. What is Brahma? Brahma is, I'm getting into definition of Brahma later on. Tat am ashi. Tumi shei. So, I'm sorry, I got it in Bengali. You are that, thou art that. That's what we say, right? Tat am ashi. So you see, all these three, what we have talked, we are talking about the same thing. We are talking about the same thing in different languages. Now, there are two distinct school of thoughts here that I'll briefly touch upon before moving into. And the final is, of course, Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahma. It's kind of a big thought, right? Because we all know for sure, everyone in this room, you, I, everyone, we are going to die. We were born someday, and we are growing old, and our capacity is reducing by the day. Every day we are growing old. Now we say that there is this absolute intelligence, there is this concept of God, and you are that. That seems, like fantastical. That's fantasy. How that can be real, right? So we'll try to see how that can be real, even with the concept of the limitedness of who we feel we are currently in this world, right? So, one of the great proponents of Advaita Vedanta is Acharya Shankar, or we nowadays call him the Adi Shankar, Shankaracharya or Adi Shankar. And he had this very famous, people say, hey, I've defined the whole of Upanishad in just a half a phrase. Brahma Shatta Jagat Mithya. Brahma is real, everything else is unreal. Jiva Brahmaiva na para. So he says, Brahma is the only reality, everything else is unreal. And there is, we too are that same Brahma. Our soul, we are that Brahma. Now, here is a question of what is the reality? Now, obviously, if I ask a question commonly, and whenever I ask a question to everyone is, who are you? The first answer I get is, I'm so and so, this is my name. At best, I get a profession. But we think a bit details. What our scientists have found out, that anything we see, anything we perceive, is actually a mental image constructed somewhere in the brain. We don't know where, but the neurons light up, and we know, it's a mental image that is being constructed, and we perceive it in a certain way. And that is what creates our objective reality. Everything we see outside the world, outside the body, inside the body, is what we perceive with our senses. And there is no other alternate means. Whatever goes in, we interpret in a certain way. Now, here was a traditional argument forwarded by science for a long time, was that evolution ensures that whatever we perceive is the reality. Because survival of the fittest. If it was not reality, then we would have perished. Right? Recently, this particular theory was challenged in a spectacular way. And I'm getting into details of that. But the summary of that story is, Darwin's theory is survival of the fittest. So, the algorithm looks for the fitness, not for the accuracy. And they simulated this, using game theory. They did a computer simulation of it. In all the scenarios, inevitably, the reality lost to fitness. So in other words, Darwinism ensured that the reality was the casualty. What we see cannot be what is the reality. There is a very interesting example. Back in the Australian outbacks, they have this beetle that for thousands, tens of thousands of years or maybe more, they have done a fitness function on, on finding their best mate. And how do they do that? Find the most, like red colored, rounded shape with dimples, bigger the better. That's pretty much the fitness function of finding a female. As it happened, that, the beer bottles that they used in the Australian outback, they had the same shape. So all these beetles, they focused on the beer bottles, the rejected beer bottles, and they lost interest in the actual females. As a result, the population was to the point of extinction. Finally, the government had to take steps and say, change the size of the beer bottles. Change the shape. We don't want to kill the beetles. But the thing is, their fitness function worked well for tens of thousands of years. There was nothing wrong with it. And yet, it wasn't the reality. The beer bottle wasn't their mate that they were looking for. That didn't help them survive. So, survival of the fittest, that theory, evolution doesn't ensure what we perceive in our brain is what is reality. Now, some of you may be thinking about the matrix, right? It is true. I mean, you can be fed electrical signals that can simulate a whole different reality than what it is. We have come close to it with the VR. Currently, they are sending electrical signals in your brain to even implant artificial memory. So, yes, what you see is not what is real. But, that again is like, come on, I'm touching the table. I'm hitting on the wall. How can this not be real? Thing is, every day you have dreams, right? Most of you have dreams every day. Many of the dreams are colorful even. And we do all these things. We meet with people. And sometimes we have the same people that we have in real world. Sometimes we are in a different world with new people we don't know. And yet, there is a constant. You remain in the dream and you remain in this world. In the dream world, everything seems real. You even get hurt, you get afraid, right? Everything happens. And yet when you wake up from it, you clearly and distinctly realize that that is not what reality is. Right? It happens every time.
No, I just have this question. When do we have a realization that whatever I'm having, perceiving is not real? When do the realization?
After you are out of the dream, that is most of the cases. Every day when you wake up in the morning.
How do I know that I'm in a dream or I'm out of the dream now? How do I know that?
That's a deeper question that we'll address. But let's look at the simile from the example point of view. Yes, everything is a dream, but let's not come into that now. Right? That will be like Inception we are talking about. Right? Dream within a dream within a dream. But the truth is, now you can see, just from the point of view of this example, everything that you perceive to be real is not real, and that is a possible state. That is not an imagination. That is a good example. Now there is a lot of research done on another aspect of dreaming, another side of dreaming, which is called lucid dreaming. Stanford has done a lot of research on it. I believe Dr. Feynman also, he experimented at one point with the lucid dreaming. So this is an interesting portion in a dream, and I'm sure all of you had it at some point in time, when within the dream, you realized that you are dreaming. And that is the point where you can totally control your dream. Because you are dreaming, right? You want to fly in the air, you fly in the air. You want to walk through walls, you can walk through walls. You are like the god of the dreams. Right? So you see, if in an imagination, if you know that what is your true self, then the constraints of the imaginative, the dream world, the walls of the dream world, everything, all of them ceases to be the constraint. Because all these constraints were all along in your mind and not outside it. Are you with me so far? So, we came to Brahma Shatya Jagat Mithya Jiva Brahma Napara. And listen to the words carefully, because when we talk about the science, you will see how science validates some of these core concepts. Brahman is the only truth. The world is unreal. Actually, what it says is something very interesting. It says, everything else is like images on a mirror. Right? Like, for example, you watch so many serials on your TV, right? And they seem real. Sometimes we cry and laugh with that, everyone watches these serials. But then, we can also break from that, knowing that this is unreal. We live in the middle of reality and unreal, because we know this is a serial. But at times we get so immersed, we forget it's a serial. But what is real? The TV set is real, of course, in the relative context of reality. That is real. But the images are displayed, like images are displayed on a mirror, right? There is no difference between Brahman and the Atman, individual self. So when we say Advaita, people commonly confuse it with like some kind of like unism. Now you see, in Islam, there is this concept of one Allah and we are all his disciples, right? I mean, we are the smaller beings. I'm not talking about that. When we say Advaita, I'm not talking about single entity, Godhead. I cannot say it's a single entity, because when we say single, we automatically imagine something more than single. That's why we say non-dual. Because there is nothing else. There is no gap. When we talk of Brahma, the concept, I'm talking about the concept. There is no gap. There is nothing, good, bad, the good people, bad people, the terrorists, the inanimate objects, the animate objects. There is nothing other than Brahma. And it is dense. So there is no chance of anything getting into that. So nothing you perceive, nothing you can perceive, the universe, the multiverse, there is nothing other than Brahma. That is the concept. And then we'll get into more details of how and what. So there is another, they try to define. See, one of the challenges of defining Brahma is there is nothing equal. See, how do I say, when I define someone, if I want to define Siddharth, how we say, hey, his color is like so-and-so, he looks like so-and-so. We always use a comparative sense to define, right? But there is nothing to compare. So in a way, we cannot even define what is Brahma, but we can realize it. It may be undefinable, but it is not unknowable, right? So the ultimate Brahman is devoid of attributes, or we say Nirgun Brahma. The entire phenomenal universe is subject to the categories of space, time, and causation. Space and time we understand. Causation also we understand, right? Cause and effect. We do something, something happens. And we can see in all our experience, nothing happens without a cause. And so far so, we have this even, we have this theory of, Pap, Punya, and in Christianity we have sin, Guna, across the board there is this concept. So, that causality is in our mind. We have across the civilization, across the culture, and we know in science, causality is a reality. It's not something we are imagining. We do something, I drop this phone on the floor, chances are it will break. What's the cause? Because I dropped it, right? But then it says, but Brahman, the supreme reality, is beyond. Remember, we are saying Brahman is in everywhere, dense. And we are saying it is also beyond. How is that possible? The only way this is possible is everything that we see is really an illusion. And how, okay, we'll get more into detail. But these words are kind of interesting also. We'll see these concepts tackled again and again down this presentation. Brahman is not subject to causality, but independent of the causal chain. Independent of the causal chain. Karta karma karan, as we say, popularly in Bengal, I think it's in Sanskrit also. It's independent of the causal chain. That which is not destroyed, when the upadhis of time and space and causation are destroyed, is Brahman, the immortal reality. So I have discussed the next slide, which is Jagat Mithya. The unreality of the world with few examples. Now we'll actually look into more of it down the presentation. So bear with me for a few more slides. So there is another fantastical concept that I would like to introduce you, and I'll just throw it out there. The appearance of the reality, the reason I'm looking into it, because I can explain the concept, but I don't want to miss the words. Great people have said it, I want to respect them. I don't like remembering things which I can write it. The appearance of the reality of the universe depends on the strength of will. See, the concept here is like this. You have seen a magician's show, right? Nowadays there are a lot of street magicians and there are many good magic we get fooled for some time, right? Down the road maybe we can realize some of it we cannot realize. Bigger the magician, more powerful the magician, his illusion lasts longer and fools a larger number of people, right? So imagine someone with an extremely powerful willpower, and in his imagination is the world we have created. And that person we call Brahma. And he has other names also. Brahma is not Brahma. There is a difference. He is a person with such a powerful will that he could create the world. And because his will is so powerful, you see,
when you are saying Brahma as a person, that means you are attributing Brahma.
yes, Brahma is in a way is a Jivatma, but on a much higher scale. Not Brahma. There's a difference. There's a stark difference. Now you see, there are examples of it in real life. Look at people who in a single generation created a humongous empire out of nothing. Dhirubhai Ambani comes to mind, Bill Gates comes to mind. These people, when they started, there was nothing. They didn't start on a big fortune. And then out of their imagination, out of their vision, they created a big empire which employs hundreds of thousands of people. Right? They have created some kind of reality.
But it may not be the willpower of them, but it could be something like let me explain this.
It's a combined willpower, you mean?
It's just a question of chance, luck.
No, but they must have thought that it is possible.
See, it's a vision. When you have a certain vision, one
Everybody has a
thing.
vision, right? Everybody has a vision, like
But we
Dhirubhai
don't
Ambani.
work
But
hard
people
for that
only know
vision.
Dhirubhai Ambani.
Right. See, it's the power of the vision. We all attribute things to chance because we try to look at an escape route, right? We don't want to. But the truth is, anyone with such a strong vision, over time, they succeed. Chance sometimes goes in favor of you, sometimes goes against you. And there are way too many examples. You can't just attribute all of them to chance. If you actually talk to these people, you will find out that they have a different personality than the people who failed. They have a much powerful personality. You may like them, you may dislike them, you may hate them. But they have something which makes them succeed. And that is the vision. They have seen something which others couldn't. Right? However they may have achieved it. Some of them achieved in an honest way, some of them achieved in not so honest way. But that vision was ultimately achieved in the end. Now imagine someone with a millionfold of that kind of vision and more. And that imagination. Now see, lot of people who work in these big companies, I believe in Cognizant's vision. I believe in TCS vision. I mean, these people are led by one who was at the top or who is at the top. And that percolates down the chain. Right? So we have then become a collective vision, we try to support that kind of vision. So a strong will always leads people of weaker will. And the same thing is seen in the military, in today, in the past. There is always a chain of command. The good commander can do miracles opposed to a bad commander. I mean, that has been seen through ages, right? This is not something new. So yes, the willpower has an actual effect that we have seen. And, there are numerous instances where, lot of very surprising thing happens. And I'll take down the presentation. I'm sure some of them will be clear. So now after this discussion, we'll talk something, relatively light-hearted. So, in my study with different segments of Vedanta, especially some of the very ancient and very, well-respected treatises of Advaita Vedanta, I have found repeated reference of multiple universes or multiverses, right? So, specifically here I'll talk about two books. I will talk about Tripura Rahasya, which is my favorite, and the other is Yog Vasisht. And I'll give a brief background of what these books are. See, everyone, all of us must have heard of Ramayana, and I'm sure some of you have read that. What we don't realize is the Ramayana that you have read is the Ramayana that is for the common people, and that doesn't give you a fraction of the character of who Ram is. Why we call Ram Purushottam, we won't even realize unless you read Yog Vasishtha Ramayana. Yog Vasishtha Ramayana consists of the few small years in the teenage of Ram when he was taught by his guru, Vasishtha Muni. And he was an excellent student. He used to read, he used to learn from the guru during the day. During the night, he used to contemplate on it. And there you can find the character of Ram, the power of the concept of Ram, why he is such a revered person in our culture. Yog Vasishtha Ramayana is just few short years, but the size of the book is bigger than Ramayana. That's interesting. And that is replete with stories of multiple universes. And so is Tripura Rahasya. I will just touch upon 2-3 very interesting stories. Please investigate, please read through them. They are widely available, downloadable on the net. Tripura Rahasya, you can download the PDF. But because, someone is selling it, I didn't give the actual link. But search, you can find it. Yog Vasishtha Ramayana, I have given the actual link, I believe. These are all available on the net. So one of the most interesting story of Yog Vasishtha is the story of Leela and Saraswati. Leela was a queen who, due to his actions, due to his prayers, he propitiated his, made Saraswati happy. Saraswati today we know as a goddess of, passing exams, right? But Saraswati was traditionally the goddess of wisdom, the ultimate wisdom of Brahmagyan, not about passing exams. Anyway, and she got one boon that whenever she is in trouble, she will get her, she will come to her. So her husband died, and she was really sad. And she started praying for her. Saraswati arrived as promised. And then the story begins from there. She took her in her astral form and showed her multiple universes, in universes universes within the confines of his own palace. And that palace was that universe was within the confines of another heart. So universes within universe, multiverses, traveling through multiverses, how time is different in these universes. Somewhere the time is traveling fast, somewhere the time is traveling slow. And this is not in one place they have told, this is in multiple places, replete with this. So, the things they covered was the multiverses. Nowadays there are like half a dozen theories, and I'll cover some of them, which talk about the multiverses and how science thinks that there's a very real possibility, and they're actually searching to find multiverses. Universes within the confined space, or that is explained through Carl dimensions. Different rate of time, relativity, right? But I'll get into more details of this. Right? This is a simple chapter. Then we'll get into something more interesting, more, into experimental physics. So I talked about the Leela Saraswati, right? There's one small phrase I would like to quote. In the majestic infinite consciousness universes come and go, in each atom, like specks of dust in beams of light, shining through a hole in the roof. See, whenever some sunlight falls through the window or some places, you often see there are dust particles, right? In Sanskrit we say trash renu, it's probably pollen grains or dust particles. That is what it is there. There is a fantastic story in the Puran about, Indra hiding inside one of them and creating his own universe. But you see, these stories are replete. This is not something we have thought about. And what is the time frame? Time frame of this is the same as Ramayana, in the early part of Ramayana, right? Yes. What? Universe within that dust particle. How is it possible? Through Carl dimensions. Right? We see the space through our 3 dimensions, if we ignore time for a moment. But there are other dimensions. Right? Like imagine things in a 2-dimensional space, right? And think, so what you see small in a 2-dimensional space, may be massive in a 3-dimensional space. So the size in your dimension may not correlate the size in the other, when other dimensions are brought into the picture. Right?
But I got a very basic question, Anshuman, here.
Yes,
That all you're talking about universes, universe within universes, all about whatever you're talking about is knowledge, right? It's knowledge about the universe, knowledge about the current dimension, knowledge about string theory, whatever, right? But Vedanta is the end of knowledge. How can thing can be related to which is full of
See,
knowledge?
when you talk about it's not as the end of knowledge. When you say end of knowledge, that is a yes.
Means end of knowledge.
It also means completeness of knowledge. So, if anything is in Vedanta and if it cannot explain something which is in the real world, then that theory should be questioned. For example, Einstein's theory of relativity. It applies to very high speed objects, right? Near the speed of light. But the same theory at the low speed can explain the Newtonian physics. Einstein's theory at low speed explains the Newtonian physics, the three laws of motion and everything. So similarly, any theory which is supposed to explain the universes and beyond, if it breaks down at the normal level, then we have a problem. Right? There is another.
What you say, end of knowledge, I think it's not correct. It's knowledge of the end. Not actually.
No, it is. See, when you say end, it is the culmination of all the knowledge. So that encompasses everything else.
There is a different etymological explanation. It means a Vedanta, Ant means it's not actually the end. It's actually the gist.
Yes.
Gist of Vedanta.
Yes. Yes. So then I'll briefly touch upon another story. This one is from Tripura Rahasya. Very briefly. So there was this, this story about son of a saint who just goes in a hill, a small hillock, and brings in a huge army out of it. And it was surprising. There was nothing in that hillock to bring a huge army. Ultimately, when investigated and when it found out that there was an entire universe existing within that small hillock. Right. So that there they talk about, again, two of the concepts. Universe within a small confined space. There they also talk about the differential rate of time. So when he comes out after a day, he finds out that many years have passed. And even in Purans, you will find a lot of stories. Like, for example, if someone goes to Brahmalok and comes back and like thousands of years have passed. These are like common stories everywhere. But can they be real? I mean, they're so fantastical stories, right? I mean, they sounds like, as you said, mythology. Let's find out if there is a reality behind the mythology. So, how many of us scientists today actually believe in multiverse? But then we look into the actual theories which explains that. Unfortunately, it's like the multiverse is slightly. I'm really sorry about it, but you can actually find the presentation live on the net, and it's there. If you want the URL, I can write it down also. It could be HTTP or HTTPS. It will automatically take it.
Siddharth, I think we have got to share. Probably it will finish it. So then we have another follow-up session. I think it's very interesting.
What I would rather suggest is that
I'll complete it.
another follow-up session or another presentation, inter-presentation is being recorded. So we'll upload it. We'll rather invite more discussions on the Facebook. So
Right.
That will be
Right.
follow-up.
Okay, so some of the proponents of the multiverse theories are Stephen Hawking, Mikio Kaku, two of the names, I'm sure all of you are familiar with, and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Anyone in US, knows he's a very good science educator. And there's a whole lot of other names, very popular scientists, very well-known scientists, very well-respected scientists who support the theory. But this is not one theory we are talking.
Hyperspace is a very famous book.
Yes. And these are not just the people who are supporting. Science is not about consensus. There's a whole lot of theories which says multiverse is the only explanation out there. When you try to explain the weakness of gravity, when you look at how the universe has all the constants in just the right amount so that life can exist, right? And you will find out that there is no escape from having multiple universes. One of the things is the M theory. So essentially, string theory is extension into M theory, multi-dimension, 10 plus 1 dimensions. I'm sure many of you have read through that. So then they talk about something. I don't want to get into the theory in details because something else I want to get into the details, but these are the things you can study on your own. They talk about these brands and all these brains, not brain, brains and presence of multiple universes like layered on top of each other. All that fantastical things they talk about in string theory. So multiverse is a well accepted, hypothesis within the string theory. And they talk about the multiple dimension. So yes, there is a multiverse is part of the brain cosmology of the. Then there is a many world hypothesis. This comes from the quantum mechanics. They say that everything that you do, every dimension, every time you take a decision, either you go left or right, either you do this or that, every time a different universe is created with the alternative path that you haven't chosen. In the past, in the future. So there are literally infinite universes. And if you are a comic book buff like me, you must have read about it also in many times. But many worlds is a hard science, and this is one of the popular theory that all these consequences. Then there is the black hole cosmology. So it is postulated, it is hypothesized that every time you go through a black hole, you end up in a different universe. And there are many such universes. And there was a very popular movie recently when a person goes into the black hole and he ends up in a different, do you remember the name? In a different universe. It's a very popular movie. You should remember, right? Huh? No, not Inception. It's recent. He goes and he says all these dimensions. Yes, that's the movie. And then there's this anthropomorphic principle that I briefly alluded to. It's like, it's too good to be true. All the universal constants, everything are just the right amount. So the normal, like the Occam's razor here is like, there must be many things else where this universe has failed. Many other universes where it has failed. And this is, this is one of the places where it has succeeded and, having this kind of life that we have. But then the, people who argue against it, they say, just for that you can't just invent multiple universes. And they have a very good explanation for that. I'll briefly touch upon it. So they show that having multiple universes is actually the simplest explanation for the strangeness, for the perfectly right situation we have in the world, than trying to explain it with a single universe. So that comes under the anthropomorphic principle. So effectively the 5 strong contenders are infinite universes next to each other. So how much of the universe we can see is in our visible space, how far light can travel, and if the life of the universe is 7.8 billion years, this light after the Big Bang, then that pretty much how much light has traveled in that is the size of our universe. Anything beyond that is another universe. We can never reach that. So essentially like a patchwork quilt, many universes are spread together. And that is a very plausible thing, right? Then there are bubble universes. As things eternally expanding. And then, newer bubbles of universes are creating. Now there is a very good theory explaining that. Parallel universes, brain worlds, I have briefly touched. Brain is B-R-A-N-E, not B-R-A-I-N, right? Daughter universes from all possible outcome, the anthropomorphic principle, and the mathematical principle. Mathematically you can also see that multiple universes are possible. It's a half a dozen hypotheses, that multiple universes are a reality. Currently studies are going on to validate the multiple universes. Some say they have noticed something of multiple universes. There's a whole plethora of study of multiverses, and the most of the scientists today accept that multiverse is a reality even. Right. Now we'll talk about something. We'll get into more depth with something which which I think will really lay the foundation of some of the claims that I have made before, or prove the foundation. Back in 1935, long time back, Dr. Albert Einstein, he didn't like the quantum mechanics. He absolutely hated it. And he did several thought experiments to disprove it. One of them was spooky action at a distance. That was the exact phrase he coined, right? And there's a formal word for it also, but let's say it's a spooky action at a distance. So what happens was, and then very soon they found out that that is a reality, by the way. They found out that's a reality. So when two particles or two photons, they are entangled. And how will come? There are several ways to entangle them. It could be a gamma photon is split. There are many ways. When they're entangled, and after that, even if they move universes apart, if you change one state of the photon, here, the state will change with the other photon, irrespective of the distance. Now hold on the thought for a moment, right? Einstein was absolutely not happy with it. Because you know why? Because it breaks the causality. How is it possible? How can two things near instantaneously retain, respond to each other's action any distance apart? Quantum theory says it's possible. Just from mathematics. Remember, quantum theory most people can't understand because it's a mathematics only. People don't even try to understand anymore. But there is something very fantastical in quantum theory. But there is something more. One of the things we'll discuss it, okay, it's good in quantum theory. Does it apply to real world? Does it apply to your and mine world? In the macro universe? We'll get into that in a moment. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. What is quantum applies to the macro universe. And we'll show how. So, he postulated that there must be a hidden local action. Something going even faster than the speed of light and saying, hey, was this photon change state, so you do something. Or there was something else. Maybe initially they have all that state and it is deterministic. Right? But you see, in the quantum world, things are not deterministic. Unless you measure it, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, you can't say, simple things. Whether you will get it as a wave or a particle. Whether electron you will receive as a wave or a particle. Where is it located in space? None of them is a surety, it's a probability. It's a bunch of probability, right? But see, in a classical mechanics, we can't accept it. So initially we thought they are two different worlds and they don't collide. But interestingly, they are colliding and they are colliding heavily. And that is where the fun stuff is coming. So you see, I'll try to wrap it up quickly. Please allow me a few minutes. Because this is the main concept I'll go into and then I'll try to close the time. Okay. I think we should be done by 10-15 minutes. This is the most important part of this presentation, so bear with me for a few minutes. So, they have this, also the causality. Nothing can happen without effect. Okay, so whatever the entanglement, whatever that happened, but now that universe is apart. If I'm changing the state of one, how can the change of the state of the other be changed? That is something they couldn't understand, right? It was called EPR paradox. That's the more formal name. Einstein, Polanski, something. 3 scientists' names were there in that thought experiment. Well, the reality is they found out quantum entanglement is possible, but that is not the most important thing. What they found out is across any distance and in multiple experiments. I will just give you some of the experiments, some of the crucial experiments in recent years, right? They found quantum entanglement is possible. But in all of these experiments, there were this question whether there was a hidden locality, whether something was causing it, some data was being transferred, right? In the recent experiment in NIST in 2015, they conclusively plugged all the loopholes and says there is absolutely no locality. But then there is something else they found out. Actually, they found out before, but they repeated it. This experiment was much more rigorous. NIST proves spooky action of a distance is really real. That's their word, not mine. Hidden local action is incompatible with our experiment. NIST Krishna Sam says, experimental proof of non-local wave function collapse for a single particle using homodyne measurements. That's actually another experiment. That's a different experiment. That was also very interesting experiment. I'm not sure if I should jump ahead. But what they found out, okay, so all these experiments, this quantum entanglement experiment was done with a large number of particles, either photons or electrons, and you will see bigger particle in non-quantum scale. They quantum entangled to diamonds. Diamonds you can see with your eyes in the millimeter range, diamonds. They have quantum entangled, what do they carry? Optical fibers. Optical fibers. So it's not like this is any more, limited to the quantum realm, to very small particles. What they found out in this experiment is, I'm jumping ahead of myself, is an atom, a single atom. They managed to send a single atom, and then, they have this system where if there is a multiple atom, they will go in two different paths. But it's a single atom, it can't go in two different paths. But they had the same mechanism, and it was randomly applied. And then they had another grade where they combined both of them, as if they came from two different paths, right? So if you remember the double slit experiment of your physics years, you will know that when there is, when you are breaking this thing up, you will get a wave pattern. It appears as a wave. Right. So it appears as a wave. They sent a single atom, they still found the same pattern of a wave. That's the funny part. But the second interesting part was that grating was applied after the atom has left the location. So it had given the answer, and then the random pattern was applied. But the detector has stored the action from before. So the result was given before the action was carried out, before the question was posed. This is not a single experiment. There are multiple experiments which proves, and today it is conclusively proven, that quantum entanglement not only spans space, it also spans time. And I'm getting into that experiments. So, what really happens when space doesn't matter? I mean, space is an illusion. There is no other way to get around it. Has the whole universe connected in such a way that you change the thing, something here, and millions of light years away, something else changes. That is in no logical way possible without locality, right? Unless what we are looking at is either the same particle, and how is that even possible? Because there is a space. So the space itself must be an illusory concept. Let's get into more theory. So, you feel more comfortable with this fantastical explanation. So the question is, does quantum physics work in macroscopic world? Is it just related to this really small particle we can never see, right? So there are several experiments, if you see. I'll read through this one, just a summary, 1 line, 2 line. The uncertainty principle, one of the most famous rule of quantum physics. Remember, uncertainty principle ensured, people thought that because of the uncertainty principle, we can never see this effect in the, the macro world. The uncertainty principle, one of the most famous rules of quantum physics, operates in macroscopic objects visible to the naked eye. And they did it with half millimeter size. The results of the recent experiment are novel in that they show both classical and quantum mechanics operating on the same scale. It's like a half a millimeter cylinders they have used, and they have found out, applying laser, they could get quantum perturbations. So essentially that Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You can't properly, if you give enough photons, the location, it starts vibrating wildly, and so you can't find out the exact location. That Heisenberg's principle applies here. Then they linked two diamonds to quantum entanglements. They are visible in the millimeter size, and unlike even this experiment, this one was done at the room temperature. Two diamonds entangled, they are behaving as a single particle. And as a lot of experiments have shown, in such cases, distance is not an object. Theoretically, we know it can be light years and millions of light years. They have done for miles. I think 100 of miles was the last thing they have done. hundreds of miles, and they still found the quantum entanglement perfect. And the transmission of information is instantaneous. Previously, they thought they can't use it to, like communicate faster than light speed using quantum entanglement, but now it seems it's very much possible. But that's a whole totally different angle that I'm not going to go into. And there's a beautiful picture I can show you. They managed to entangle crystals in 2011, but now they have entangled two optic fibers populated by 500 photons. I briefly mentioned to you about this, right? The NIST research that I previously mentioned to says no faster than light communication. The two detectors, now this is one very interesting part of the NIST experiment. What they found out was, even if we assume that there is a communication, a local communication faster than light happening between these two particles or these two group of atoms or whatever, these objects, you still cannot explain the NIST experiment because they ensured that even at instantaneous speed, it cannot be explained because it is happening before. The results are shown before the actual entanglement is done. That's the beauty of this. They have done some fantastic experiment in recent years. The two detectors measured photons from the same pair a few hundreds of nanoseconds apart, finishing more than 40 nanoseconds before any light speed communication could take place between the detectors. Information traveling at the speed of light would require 617 nanoseconds to travel between the detectors. Non-locality, so now what happens is, there is no way around it. We can try to explain it away, but there is really no explanation. So Physics of the Universe tries to summarize it as a magazine. It's a respected magazine. But this is across the board. This is not like, the language is interesting. Non-locality suggests that universe is in, by the way, Bell, etc., they tried to explain and say, look, the only way we can explain this is through non-locality. Any of the classical causality is not working. In quantum universe, causality is not real anymore. So, and then they said something beautiful. And that the separate parts of the universe, non-locality suggests that the universe is in fact profoundly different from our habitual understanding of it, and that the separate parts of the universe are actually potentially connected in an intimate and immediate way. In fact, Einstein was so upset by the conclusions of non-locality at one point that he declared that the whole quantum theory must be wrong, and he never accepted the idea of non-locality up till his dying day. So can we at this point draw the conclusion that space is an illusion and there is no causality? Because what we found out in the quantum realm, causality is not there. We have found out quantum realm applies to physical in the macro world that we can see. We have found out it is not one experiment, but it is multiple experiments. Across the board, all the loopholes have been closed. So there is no other way. And if we accept non-locality in the macroscopic world, there is no other way to accept it other than saying, hey, causality has to be an illusion, space has to be an illusion, whether we realize it or not.
About time.
I'm coming to that. Actually, we did already, but I'll give some more experiments to make it sound more interesting. These experiments in 2003, 4, 2011, 12, repeatedly, they showed that quantum entanglement goes back in the past. So, I'll just simplistically try to explain this. Two entangled particles, right? And one of them, say for example, they are either, they can be either captured as a wave or a particle. Some very simplistic, simple experiment. Not really simple, but one of them you already determine in your detector, but you don't know what it is. The other particle, sometime later, you convert it and express it as a wave. And then you go back and see what was captured in the detector, you find that it was also captured as a wave. And then vice versa. Do it as a particle and as a particle. this experiment, this basic experiment, was repeated to various circumstances, and we found out that entanglement also spans time. So they are now saying, in the quantum realm, they have to say that, right? But we saw quantum realm is not really quantum realm. The causality of time also is unreal. It is an illusion.
So what you are saying is, if we do something today differently, so that changes what Great Akbar did so many hundred years.
I am not saying that, but I'll come to that. Let's just confine ourselves to what this is saying. Time is an illusion. Does not necessarily mean you are changing Akbar's time. Bear with me. There is more to it than that. There is a beautiful picture. Can you show that statue picture if possible? That kind of exemplifies what I'm trying to do. So there is this scientists have entangled particles, and none of this is my word, it's quotation actually. Entangle particles in such a way that a future decision can affect the past states of the particles. A future decision affects the past state of the particles. Now, just give it some time and let the implications sink in. This is real. This is not theoretical anymore. There are a lot of theories from 2003-4, even before. They are continuously doing experiment, and they have found out in every cases that this is true. Quantum entanglement reaches in the past. I have touched now all of this that I am referring to, all of these are in the references. So you can read this article, draw your own conclusion. Remember, you don't believe what anybody says. You prove it for yourself till you are 100% satisfied or not. So you don't have to believe anything I am saying. Just take this, do your own research, validate it or invalidate it. So, whether these two particles are entangled or separate have been decided. These are from two experiments. After they have been measured, right, the researchers, so there are two groundbreaking experiments in 2011-12 time frame, which shows this, that quantum entanglement spans across time also. There was in 2003-4, then there was in 11-12. And I have given both of the references. I don't want to repeat it for the sake of brevity. But please go through the slides. But then they did something very fantastic. I'll just briefly mention it. They have these two particles they've entangled, right? And there is other two set of particles they've entangled. And one from each is going in. And after these particles have been destroyed, the states measured, right? They have entangled these particles. And now they found out that even after these particles are not any existence, their previous action could be changed by what you do much ahead in the future. And the two particles which were not even directly entangled. And then they did some beautiful thing called, quantum photography. So they used the entangled particles and they threw it on an object, and the reflection they couldn't directly see. But from the entangled other set, they could draw the photograph. So there is a new era of science that is coming. New era of information transmission, new era of everything. Quantum entanglement is everywhere across the board. But the implications of it are profound. Physical, we can get a lot of discoveries, a lot of new good stuff. But think of what it really means. And can you have any other way to explain it other than saying space and time? Both are illusions. Are scientists saying that? Hell yeah, they are saying the same thing. So I'll just last line. In addition, the non-locality of the quantum mechanics as manifested by entanglement does not only apply to particles with spatial separation, but also with temporal separation. Temporal as in time. So time is an illusion, right? And then there is another beautiful way of looking into it. As Associate Professor Andrew Truscott says, reality doesn't exist if you are not looking at it. Reality does not exist if you are not looking at it.
Unless you have the knowledge of whatever is happening, there is no.
No. Anything that you see So there is this old, story in the quantum mechanics world. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody is listening, did it really make a sound? But now, that experiment that I referred to in the before.
Schrödinger's cat is also
Right. The experiment with the single atom, they made this observation. Right? Two things. They found interference was generated even with a single atom. That should not be possible by all explanations. Second thing is,
Experiment with electron, not atom.
no, they did an experiment with atom here.
Which atom?
Some atom, but definitely not an electron. Oh, I can tell you, hold on. Helium. Answer before question. I think I explained that before. Now, there was something else, and I'll just skip the slide because I've already discussed it. The evolutionary argument against reality. So, the cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman, I already discussed it, uses evolutionary game theory to show that our perception of an independent reality must be an illusion. There is a TED talk on it also. The link I have given contains the TED talk, so you can refer to it independently. Please do that.
Is it the same link, the TED talk?
Yeah, it's embedded in that link.
You said relative reality.
Independent reality must be illusion. Pardon me?
You said independent reality.
Independent reality.
Independent reality in what sense? Let's talk on
Anything that you see is not real. It is an image that is being constructed in your mind.
That means you are saying, to put it in mind, knowledge of physics is absolutely restricted to the secondary level, and all this is very, very true. To put it very simply, I believe, suppose I am blind and my husband is blind. We are both blind.
Yes.
To reach you, with my foot size, I take 25 steps. That is a reality to me, space and time.
Is it?
That's a reality to me. Because I take 25 steps. My husband, who is taller and has a larger foot size, takes 15 steps to reach you.
Okay.
Correct? That is a reality to him. We are not perceiving anything with our optical sense. We are perceiving it with our inner sense.
No. What you are perceiving, see, even the steps that you are taking is a signal that is going in your brain from your nerves.
Absolutely, it's a physical reality.
No, we have we are not even sure that what you are perceiving has anything to do with the physical reality. Because you are getting, what you are saying as steps may not even be a step.
Fine, but what is this time and space we are both conquering? Physically, we are conquering the same distance.
Is your husband is even there? Because your husband is also an imagination. Pardon me, I know it's kind of outrageous, but bear with me.
I'm not saying that. It's the distance we are conquering, both of us, as individuals.
You see, anything in a dream, the relative world of a dream, everything seems real. But once you wake up from the dream, everything is unreal. So the fact that you are perceiving something as real in your sense of reality does not mean it is essentially real. Because see, when you are in a dream, you perceive the same argument applies. You take 10 steps, right? But you know it's not real because you wake up, you're lying in your bed. So just because you are counting the steps doesn't mean that's a reality. There are many ways that can be unreal. Right?
We come to the basic concept of what is reality.
I'll come to that.
So, Anshuman, there is a contradiction. The realization of whatever you are saying, Brahma, can only done through experimentation, right?
I'm coming to that. Just in the next slide.
Can only experimental.
See, the thing is, can I take like 3-4 minutes of your time, right? I'll try to wrap it up. See, so you see, when in the, I don't know, 15th, 16th century, when this, the new age of science have started coming, right? People, even at that early stage, they had this concept that there was something, they could perceive. Even today, they perceive there is a consciousness. Every one of us know you exist, right? Irrespective of anything. But science said, hey, I can't understand it, so let me forget all about it. Let me behave as if it doesn't exist. So what they did, they tried to create this whole field of psychology, assuming we are some kind of a machine, some kind of a robot. So if they have seen by experiment that people in this situation act in a certain way, so they assume that everyone else will be acting in a certain way. Here's the beautiful story. Recently they verified hundreds of papers in the field of psychology. And all of the papers they found to be wrong, couldn't be proven, incorrect conclusions. In essence, all of them flat wrong. All of them. So there's this CEO of a genetics company.
No, but what is the meaning of wrong and right? I mean, that itself is illusion. I mean, since there is no concept of reality.
Yes, true.
Another thing,
Yes.
like, where exactly does it relate to Advaita Vedanta?
I'm coming. Give me a minute. Can I answer him first?
No.
Yes. See, my job is to first show that yes, it is truly unreal. So I will use the existing construct of what you perceive as real to show that it is unreal. So yes, within the unreal world, I am using the constructs of the unreal world to show you that the world is unreal. So I can use that logic.
But reality is a relative thing. That much you should
Huh?
accept, right? When you are saying something is real, but you are talking in relative terms. Like she said, take 15 steps or
No,
25
there is something called absolute reality. I'm coming to that in a jiffy.
Oh, you mean there is a thing called absolute reality?
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. So, but how do we get to it if there is something? See, the question is now the question comes is how do we get to absolute reality? So, the process of science is observe the observable universe. Observe the observable universe and try to draw conclusions from it. You observe the stars, you measure the stars, you measure every physical phenomena and try to draw theories, hypothesize theories, prove it, experiment it like that. What these people found out is that this world seems to be literally endless. There is no end to knowledge, and I am sure many of you are realizing, at this time. So they said, what exists outside also exists inside. Why not apply the same faculty of observation to myself, to my consciousness? And then they started observing. And the things that I've told before, these are all observable. These are not theories. And they put it very bluntly. Religion doesn't even begin, or spirituality doesn't begin unless you have perceived it yourself. It doesn't even begin, then it's all theories. Once you start perceiving, then it becomes real. So what's the process? Today, what's the process of learning science? The process of learning science is simple. You go to school, you do the experiments, hopefully you do the experiment and not, mug it for the exams, and you prove it for yourself. Michelson-Morley experiment, all the quantum mechanics experiment, you can do it yourself. The famous Cavendish experiment. Many of us don't do it, but it is possible, right? Same here. The difference is, all they say is, you don't need any equipment, you just observe your own mind. So, in this last, couple of slides, couple of minutes, I'll briefly touch upon what is the process Advaita Vedanta says of finding out what the reality is. You don't have to believe because I am saying so. You have to prove it yourself, and only then it becomes real for you. Right? Otherwise it's a theory. And theories are dime a dozen. So that's called the Gyan Marg. And the way of Gyan Marg is simple. Vichar, contemplation, analysis. And it's said a 3-step process. First you read the stuff. Like from your guru know the stuff, or from good books from the realized person. And then you analyze it logically. Don't accept it blindly. Analyze it logically. If you are not convinced, then search more, ask more, till you reach where you are convinced. Sharan Manan and the Nididashan. Then try to realize it, try to apply it. Once you are convinced 100% of the logicality, then you try to apply it. For some people, some very famous people, It was like really easy effort. I'll give two stories. One of the story you have surely heard. The second I'm pretty sure you haven't heard. First one was this king who was lying in a very lovely bed in his pleasure garden, as they say, with his wife, and then suddenly heard some song, and he started contemplating. Wow, that's a new idea. I've never heard of this idea. And such was his intellect that in less than an hour, he realized the reality on his own, and then he started thinking about it and went into deep meditative state. And nobody disturbed him. He was the king. Who dares disturb the king? And by the morning, before the morning sun came out, he was a completely realized person. But the second story is actually a very rare story. I'm not sure how many of you heard about it. It was about this lady who was, she was in the oldest profession in the world. And one night she didn't get any clients. And she was having the physical feelings. And she started thinking, where is it coming from? She started analyzing, contemplating on it. Why am I getting this feeling? And in her analysis, in her thought process, in her introspection, she found the solution. And she too, in a very short period of time, say it to be just one night, she became completely realized. But there are some other stories also, a lot of very interesting stories. And more than the stories, they actually tell you the path. It's more like a guidebook. One of the reasons I recommend people this book, Tripura Rahasya, is it's actually like a guidebook. You can actually use it in your study. It's not like vague fun days. It's like how you are going to do it. It's a step-by-step guide kind of thing.
This realized person that you are repeatedly talking about, the realized person, I mean, that is probably the biggest illusion of all.
Why do you say that?
What's so real about it?
The real about it is, look,
You are trying to put
see, remember that scale of testing. If a person is truly realized, then he should
What do
be
you mean by truly realized? Define it.
truly realized. He have perceived and become one with the reality. He have identified his true self. That is what I exactly mean by realized. He has known the reality beyond all the veils. That is the meaning of realized. And how can you know that he is truly realized? He should be able to, do anything or everything that is, he should be able to transcend the realities of this universe even. His capability should be such that the laws of universe shouldn't apply to him. Only then you can say, yes, this guy is truly realized. Because if it is not, then if it is like, let the mountain come to me and the mountain doesn't come, so I will go to the mountain, then sure you are not realized. The guy, girl, whoever should be able to transcend the laws, should be beyond the laws. Should be able to break any laws of the universe, any immutable laws of the universe. Only then you can be convinced. And the Vedanta says you don't have to believe anybody. You will find it yourself. Constant of gravity. Normally, if I jump, I am not flying. Can I fly? Hell no. This we think as immutable. I mean, without devices, without a propeller and all that fancy gadgets. Simple stuff. Don't go very complicated. I throw something in the air, I throw this in the air, it will fall down. Pretty much immutable. Normal circumstances. Can you break it? Without any magic, without any props. Anything we take for granted, the immutable laws, can you break it? Then, it has to have a way to prove it. And the key of Vedanta is, Advaita Vedanta says is simply, you don't have to trust anyone. Prove it for yourself. Like you prove for science. Prove or disprove it. This is what we have found out. And it doesn't mean anything to you unless you prove it for yourself. Same with quantum mechanics. You can say, hey, is it real? Find it for yourself. It's a theory for you, right? You haven't seen the quantum effects, but you chose to believe it. Nowadays, many people say we believe in science. Science is not something you believe in. Science is experiment. You have done something, you have proven something, you can verify the same thing. If it doesn't come, then that theory is wrong. Like they have proved for the theory of psychology. You see a lot of this biology, medical science theories are going wrong. Have you wondered why? Butter was bad, butter is good. Aspartame good, aspartame bad. Stevia good, stevia bad. Cholesterol bad, half good, half bad, now totally good. Gluten bad, gluten is absolutely meaningless, it was a joke. Right? Why is this happening? Are they all liars? There's something else. You are trying to create science ignoring the very foundation of our existence, which is our consciousness. And so when you are trying to measure it on human body, things are breaking. You think you take an antibiotic that 100% works on all people? No. The antibiotic comes to market only when it works on more than 50% of the people. Most people don't know that. They think it happens, it's a miracle. No. In many cases it doesn't work. And then you give a different antibiotic. So science is all about statistics and probabilities in that realm. And that's why all these theories go wrong. Being fat is great, early days. Chele amar roga hoye jacche. Then it is bad, like, oh, really, really bad. Now we're saying, yeah, maybe it's not that bad. Right? I'm waiting when it starts becoming all good, so I'm not really caring about it. And he'll decide it. So the steps are two simple things. Analyze for yourself what is real, what is unreal. Right? Nitya, anitya, vichar, we say. Now, we can understand, now I'll give you some very simple thing for you to think about. I promise, 1 minute. Okay? 1 minute. Nitya, anitya, vichar.
Because the time, 1 minute really doesn't mean anything. If you specify the time, probably it might mean something real to you.
Okay, my watch is, okay, let's make it 8. Is that good? Okay. 10 minutes. That's not 1 minute. See, for me, everything is unreal, right? Okay, jokes apart. Nitya, anitya, vichar is, see, now a very simple logic. A lot of people, know people who have had transplantations. Maybe, you are one of the people who have had organ transplantation. A kidney transplantation, even a heart transplantation. Does the person change? Never have you ever observed the person change? Hands and legs are, operated upon, transplanted upon, removed from the body, person remains the same. And last year there was a talk, and maybe it has already done, in Russia they were trying to transplant the human human brain. That's kind of complicated because, the stem is very hard to replace it. But, every other organ has been transplanted. And there is no good reason to assume that our seat of consciousness even lies there. In fact, all studies have shown it's not possible in the brain that it lies the seat of consciousness. We don't even know where the seat of consciousness is. So if this body is not really you, at least you can see, you can do an inferential logic, inductive reasoning, that none of the organs, if you transplant it, if you change it, you don't change. You can assume that even with the brain, even with anything else, you won't change. Then what makes you really? Mind, your thoughts change. Intelligence, you're changed. When you were young, you're sharp. With age, you may become a bit foggy. Right? A lot of things happens. Intelligence affects. Diseases affects. Mind, is a constantly changing thing. But you are always there. You are the unchangeable. So the key idea is to observe the unchangeable. The same you that remains between the sleep state and the awake state. Observe it. Do nothing more. Just observation gives the knowledge. As is with science. Who am I? Or as Raman Maharishi used to say, Naniyar in his own language. Nitya, anitya, vichar. What is real and what is unreal? That is the way of the Gyan Marg. Just continuously contemplation, analyze in a logical way. Don't subscribe to any superstition. You don't have to have faith. You don't have to worship anybody. You don't have to go to any temple. You can have any faith. Doesn't matter. Just analyze, just think, contemplate. And have a clear mind, not a foggy mind. A key idea is to quieten the mind actually. All this process, whether you are a devout person, what you do, when you worship in temple, you are thinking of one God. What you are really doing, you are quietening your mind. That's the key idea. So anyway, that summarizes, that's a brief of what I was trying to tell today. So this is a very simple process of Gyanmark, and rest I have provided all the links that you can please refer to, and in this URL, you can actually download the presentation, and there is some, brief contact information given. If you need, to discuss anything, feel free to call up. That's it. Now, feel free to ask any questions. I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
No, if things are so unreal, why should we really bother for physical well-being and all these things, all stuff? So what is the expert?
Because you are deluded, that's why you bother.
How do I really understand that I'm deluded?
That's where the science comes in. Analyze the research.
What does Advaita Vedanta say?
Advaita Vedanta says simple, the world is unreal. Don't focus on the world, focus on what is real. Do you want to keep your body? Sure, keep your body. Nothing with that. Do whatever minimum that is necessary to keep your body going. But don't focus too much on the body. Because you see, any of your relatives, and this is the part where I also got hurt, when I was first getting into this field, it's like, nobody is actually really your own. Not even your parents, not even your children, wife, husband, anybody. They are the relationship we have made, and it breaks like friendship. With time, these are all temporal things. Right? So is your wealth. So is your knowledge that many of us are proud about. None of this, we are really.
No, when you say knowledge, you must mean material knowledge. You mean material knowledge, right?
I mean material knowledge. Yes. None of the knowledge. See, that is the immaterial knowledge, is realization. See, when we say knowledge, we say knowing something. I know Java, I know C, I know mechanics, I know civil. This. That knowledge is not like this knowledge. That knowledge is reality. And that reality always exists within us. It doesn't leave us even for a moment. Only thing is, we are not looking at it. We are deluded. Even when we see it, we can't recognize it.
In Sanskrit, they say Vidya and Avidya.
That is true. Yes. Then they say Para Vidya, Apara Vidya.
Sorry, Paravidya and Aparavidya.
Yes. But that Vidya is not like the regular Vidya.
Spiritual.
No, it is realization. It is proper discrimination when you clearly understand without any doubt the difference between truth and untruth.
So how is it different from spiritual knowledge?
See, it's a word. I'm trying to explain the concept. Okay. See, spiritual knowledge, some people can, there are people whom I talk to, he will give me all the fantastic tales of what Indra did, what Vishnu did and all that. Those are like knowledge.
So those are Puranic knowledge.
Those are bookish
Those are
knowledge.
legends.
Yes.
So every religion has.
When we talk about this knowledge, it is what it is called realization. It is understanding the truth without any sense of doubt. So if you are into, getting into Sanskrit, I tried to minimize the thing. Vidyate hridaya granthi chiddante sarva samshaya khiyante chasya karmani tasmin dishte paravare. So when all the doubts, are extinguished, when all your heartstrings are cut, right? That's what happens when you first have the sight of the infinite, or when you start realizing the infinite. All your questions, all your doubts are cleared. And, they say about bliss, right? Sat Chit Anand. That Anand is not something magical. That Anand is because of cessation of all worries. Because all your worries, all your pain, everything is gone. Nothing affects you anymore. That is the Anand of Sat Chit Anand. Shat is reality. Chit is your consciousness. That's all to it. It's discriminating the truth from the untruth, the real from the unreal. And not just theoretically, but understanding it clearly. Clearer than like I can see you or you can see me. Absolute clarity. That is realization. And then never again you will be deluded. You can still stay in the world. There are a lot of stories of people staying in the world and leading a perfectly normal life, and nobody realizes that.
But
The-
the news will be no fun.
It will be full of fun. It's like watching a movie, knowing it's a movie, because you'll be the lord of the world.
No, you know any person who is self-realized? Are you self-realized, by the way?
Okay, last question. There is a simple way I can answer that. But first, let me answer the previous question. I've tried searching a lot for, like perfectly self-realized person. I got my guru, Shapno Guru, they say, through dream, repeatedly. So it's not like one-time thing. But other than that, I have not met any single person that I can conclusively say. In fact, recently I was talking to a person, I thought she might be very advanced. But no, I haven't really met any single person, and everyone I hear who is self-realized is, just died few years back. That has been the story for a long, long time. Am I realized or not? That's a very direct question. Well, I'm a student. Let me put it that way. How far am I? That is for the realized persons to judge. I'll not give a straight.
Can I just summarize my own thinking by saying that since you do not know, since none of us know anybody who self-realized, it is not even worth trying, right? Because if out of the billions of people on this planet, we can't even find a single guy who self-realized, then we are basically what we are trying to chase is a mirage and a dream. It is much better.
No.
Like let's say one in a million people can get $1 billion in a lottery jackpot. It makes much more sense.
Can I quickly answer this? Yes. Well, the truth is, it's not like a binary thing. During the path, during your journey, you realize, you get several realizations that conclusively proves to you that yes, this is the right path and this is worth following. You get experiences, allow me, you get experiences that transcend reality, that are not possible in reality. You get experiences and that convinces you this is the right path. And then there is another answer to your question. So anyone who is in the path because he had something. It's not a blank, it's not a blank buying a lottery ticket. Second thing, you have to understand, as you can logically, conclusively, the intelligent person who can conclusively prove to himself that everything he sees around him is unreal, then he really anyway loses interest in the world. And that becomes idiotic for him. So he goes in that other dimension where you look around it and you start laughing. Why are these people doing this? And it feels funny. So, yes, there is a reason, because nothing else makes any sense anymore. And there is no logic which can disprove also what he has felt. So it's a logically consistent way, and if he is a logical person, because otherwise, let's look at the point of view of an atheist. Good atheist, a true atheist, he has nothing to look for. Why doesn't he kill himself? But I am opening a whole can of worms. Let's close the hatch on that one. But yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ankush.